doesn't it? This is not your typical international relationship. I mean, think about it. An open border, no visas. You can literally just walk across, live, work, travel. It's like the border barely even exists. It's truly one of the most unique, deeply connected relationships you'll find anywhere on the planet.
So that's the big question, right? How on earth do these two super close allies end up in such a bitter public fight that they're actually redrawing their own national maps out of anger? What could have possibly gone so wrong? Well, let's break it down.
First up, the recent sparks. To really get what's going on, we have to look at the immediate events, the things that basically lit the fuse on a disagreement that's been simmering for a long, long time.
So the flashpoint, it's this triangular patch of land. It's about 300 square kilometers, wedged right in at the tri-junction where India, Nepal, and China all meet. The key spots you need to remember are Kalapani, Limpiyadhura, and the super strategic Lipulekh Pass.
Okay, so here's how it went down. The first real job came in November 2019. India puts out a new map and boom, this territory is shown inside its borders. Then, just 6 months later, in May 2020, India's defense minister officially opens this new 80-kilometer road that cuts right through that exact same area, leading up to the Lipulekh Pass. It's meant to help pilgrims, but for Nepal, it's a huge deal. And the reaction from Nepal was immediate. They protested, saying, hey, you should have talked to us first. India's response was pretty blunt. The road is on our land. Well, that set off protests in the streets of Nepal. And then came the big move. The Nepali government went ahead and released its own new map, officially drawing that whole disputed area into their territory. A real tit for tat.
But here's the thing. This didn't just pop up out of nowhere. To find the real root of this mess, we have to rewind. Forget today's headlines. We need to go way back, more than 200 years, to a single line drawn on a really old map.
So after a war between the British Empire and the Kingdom of Nepal, they signed this thing called the Treaty of Sugauli in 1816, and this is the key document. It lays it out pretty clearly. The Mahakali River is the western border of Nepal. Seems simple enough, right?
Well, not so fast. Because, a river isn't always just a neat little line on a map. When you follow it upstream, you run into a huge problem. The Mahakali doesn't start at one single point. It's actually formed by two different streams. And right there, that's where this whole disagreement starts. Which one of those streams is the real border?
Yeah, the geography itself is the heart of the problem. You've got these two streams feeding the river, a bigger one on the west and a smaller one to the east. And depending on which one you pick as the true source of the Mahakali, that chunk of land we're talking about is either in Nepal or it's in India.
Now check this out. This is where it gets really fascinating. The British themselves couldn't seem to make up their mind. If you look at an early British map from 1827, it's crystal clear. The border follows the big western stream, putting the land squarely inside Nepal. But then, fast forward a few decades to the 1860s, and suddenly, British maps have shifted the border over to the smaller eastern stream. And just like that, the territory is absorbed into British India.
So, you gotta ask, why this sudden change of heart? Well, it all comes down to strategy and money. The British figured out that this land, especially the Lipulekh Pass, was a golden ticket, a key route for trade with Tibet and China. At the time, Nepal was in a weaker position and didn't really kick up a fuss. So this new boundary just kind of became the reality on the ground.
Okay, so with all that messy history as a backdrop, let's fast forward to today. Let's look at how each country uses that history to build its case. Here's a quick breakdown of the two sides of the border.
So here's the crux of it. Nepal's whole argument is built on that original 1816 treaty. They're saying, look, the treaty is the only legal document that matters. The main Western River is obviously the boundary, and any maps the British made later were just them changing the rules on their own. Now, India's claim is all about what's actually been happening for the last century and a half. They say the border has been the eastern stream since the 1860s, it's been the accepted practice, and hey, Nepal's own king never objected. They even let India build a military post there back in 1962.
But Nepal has a really strong comeback to that point. They argue that, yeah, the monarchy might not have objected, but before 1990, Nepal wasn't a democracy. They say the decisions of an unelected king can't possibly be binding on a modern, democratic country that's supposed to represent the will of the people.
And that brings us right back to the tense situation we have today. So, where do we go from here? And, is there another big player in the region quietly stirring the pot?
Yeah, you can't talk about politics in this region without asking about China, right? It's the question that always comes up. Especially since Nepal's ruling party is communist, a lot of people are wondering if Beijing is maybe pulling some strings behind the scenes.
Well, for this specific border issue, the source material actually argues probably not, and it gives two really compelling reasons. First, go back to 2015. India and China made a deal to use the Lipulekh Pass for trade. And guess what? Nepal protested against both of them, not just India. And second, this isn't some niche political issue in Nepal. You've got near unanimous agreement on this. We're talking all the political parties, ruling and opposition, are on the same page. They believe this land is theirs.
And we really have to remember this is about so much more than lines on a map. This is about a relationship where millions of people's lives are just completely intertwined. That open border, families that span both countries, the fact that thousands of Nepalis serve with incredible bravery in the Indian Army, all of that is what's really at stake here.
But the political talk has just gotten so ugly. I mean, when the Prime Minister of Nepal comes out and says something like this, it just shows you how much the official relationship has soured. And it threatens to poison those real person-to-person bonds.
Look, at the end of the day, a real solution isn't going to come from angry tweets or political speeches. The only way through this is for both sides to sit down and talk. It has to be a sensitive dialogue that gets the historical complexity and, above all, respects that incredibly deep and special relationship that the people of India and Nepal have shared for centuries.
Which kind of leaves us with one final, really tough question to think about. When you have a border dispute like this, what should be your guide? Should it be the original black and white text of a 200-year-old treaty, or should it be the reality on the ground, a practice that's been accepted for over 150 years? There's really no easy answer to that one.